So these are the new Ritchey Zeta GX gravel wheels. They're alloy, they're strong, they're affordable, and they don't weigh a ton. In this video, find out what I like and dislike about them, and while they are intended for going off-road, I'll try my best not to label them gravel specific because, you know, marketing hype. Okay, so these wheels are available in 700C and 650B sizes. The ones that I'm testing here are 650Bs, and I've had them mounted to my Specialized Diverge and set up tubeless with the Goodyear Connector Ultimate tires in a 50mm width. The front wheel comes in at 803 grams and the rear comes in at 930 for a total of 1,733 grams, which is pretty much spot on with the stated weight of 1,740 grams. Now, the rims are manufactured from 6066 alloy, which is a little bit heavier than the more common 6061, but the alloy used with these wheels is significantly stronger, which points to Ritchey's preference for prioritizing strength over saving a few grams on these dirt-oriented wheels. Now, the outer rim width is about 29 millimeters. The inner rim width is 24.5 millimeters, but I think I botched that measurement a bit as I remeasured later at basically exactly 25 millimeters, which is the stated width. Now, this should be good for tires ranging from 32 millimeters all the way up to 67 millimeters, which, yeah, that pretty much covers the entire spectrum of tires that one might run with this type of wheel. Now, the rim depth is unapologetically shallow at 19 millimeters. Ritchey clearly isn't interested in making any claims to be an aero gravel wheel set, whatever that is. Now, as with most Ritchey products, the design choices that went into these wheels just make sense for their intended purpose. I mean, these wheels aren't really meant to be a, quote, fast gravel race set. Now, the forged through-axle hubs are an in-house design that are center lock disc specific, unique New York, red leather, yellow leather. Now, the forged through-axle hubs are an in-house design that are a center lock disc specific with standard hub spacing of 12 by 100 in the front and 12 by 142 in the rear. They feature 28 J-bend spokes front and rear, and they use a 2-cross lacing pattern for strength. Now, the free hub uses a ratchet driver for 36 points of engagement, and the free hub body is available in all the different standards, Shimano, SRAM, and Campy. Now, the rims employ the, quote, OCR offset, and after pondering this for a minute, I think that just means that they're drilled asymmetrically. Now, my best guess is that OCR stands for off-center rim, but I don't actually know. Now, I don't think it has anything to do with the giant line of OCR bikes, but maybe someone who knows for sure can let us know down in the comments. Now, what I am certain of is that these rims are drilled asymmetrically, meaning that the spoke holes aren't drilled down the center line of the rim. Now, like many rims, they're actually drilled off-center to equalize spoke tension on the left and the right side, since the cassette on the rear wheel and to a lesser degree the disc mounting knuckle on the front wheel take up a bunch of space and force one of the hub flanges inward. I've been meaning to do a video explaining asymmetric rims, but basically the claim is that you get a stronger built wheel since there's more balance between the left and right spoke tension. So these wheels are set up tubeless with the Goodyear Connector tires in 50mm width. And one thing to note is that they didn't seat up right away using my booster pump with the stock layer of rim tape, but they went on fine once I used the inner tube trick to seat one side first. Now, I can't really tell if the tire was slightly baggy or if the rim diameter was slightly small. I really should have tested with another set of tires to eliminate the variable. I just didn't have the time. Either way, it's not really a big deal. An extra layer of tape on the rim would have solved this issue regardless. Okay, so I've been on this setup for a couple hundred miles now, and I've had them exclusively on the Specialized Diverge. Now, right off the bat, I noticed that they felt very stiff, which is good. There's basically no lateral play that I could detect. They spin up nice and quick, but I can't really tell if that's the wheel or just the fact that I'm used to running 700C wheels, which aren't known for spinning up quite as fast. Either way, the acceleration on the Zetas feels pretty good. Now, when cruising along the flats, they maybe don't quite hold speed like I'm used to, but again, it's marginal and could easily be a psychological effect of running a smaller diameter wheel. Now, one thing that isn't subjective is that the diameter is pretty significantly different from my 700C by 43 setup. This 650B Zeta setup is about 30 millimeters shorter in diameter, which lowers the axle by half that figure, or about 15 millimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I could definitely tell. I actually had a number of pedal strikes that I wasn't expecting, but that's purely a function of the wheel size and doesn't really have anything to do with the Zeta wheel itself. It was just something to note. Now, as far as the Zetas in particular, I really got the sense that these are a pretty bomb-proof set of wheels. Testing them on flat tarmac and maintained fire roads, it was pretty hard to say anything noteworthy about them, but once we hit the chunky stuff, the Zetas came into their own. I didn't feel the need to baby them like I tend to do with my, quote, fast carbon wheels, and it actually had a pretty notable influence on how I rode. Now, perhaps it had something to do with the fact that the bike was actually lower to the ground and that the trail figure shrank slightly, but it felt more lively when descending. Very similar to switching from a 29er mountain bike to a more playful 27.5-inch wheel. Actually, it's basically exactly the same thing, but in the context of gravel riding, this translated to a sense of fun and poppiness, for lack of a better word. I noticed that even though my downhill speed wasn't really changing when compared to the 700C set, the experience was pretty different. Rowdier, but in a good way, if that makes any sense. I felt compelled to jump and drop off of more things like roots and rocks, and the desire to skid was inexplicably more pronounced. I can't really explain it other than to say that they felt really fun. Now, as far as the weight, they aren't the lightest wheels. I brought this up in the past, but it was Bontrager who famously said of bike parts, strong, light, cheap, pick two. Now, as with most things, I think there's a spectrum within each category, and it's not necessarily all or nothing. Now, while these wheels aren't terribly light, I wouldn't consider them heavy by any means either. And I don't think you can fairly categorize these as just being strong and cheap. That would be a pretty lazy description. Now, I'm not arguing the cheap part. I completely agree that for $600 US in mid-2022, these are a steal for what you get. But rather, I'm just saying that they're both moderately strong and moderately light. These wheels are clearly designed to be strong, but I do believe Ritchey seriously considered the balance between strength and weight while trying to keep the price point low. Now, of course, there are plenty of wheels out there that are going to be a lot stronger, but of course they're going to be heavier. And I think Ritchey created a wheel here that's strong enough for the average off-road oriented cyclist, plus some factor of safety. And the resulting weight, I think, is just a byproduct of those thoughtful design choices. Now, for reference, my 700C setup is a couple hundred grams lighter than this setup overall, and maybe feels a little bit more spirited on the climbs, but the Zetas didn't really feel bogged down that much at all. They've been really fun wheels so far, and unless you're chasing KOMs and you need to have the fastest bike with the most carbon on it, a trap that we've all fallen into at one point or another, then these Zetas are an awesome wheel set. And they offer peace of mind knowing that they won't break even when things get rough, which is something that a carbon wheel can't always promise. So who are these wheels for? Well, like I said, they're not for an elite racer looking to eke out every last performance gain. But they aren't a low-quality OEM wheel either. I think these fall into that broad mid-range category, and I honestly believe that these would be a tremendous upgrade over most stock wheels that come on complete gravel bikes. Which means basically they're for anyone who's recently gotten into gravel cycling, and let's face it, that's a whole lot of people, who are looking for that next step in creating a more capable and fun bike to ride. Stock wheels on most bikes are notoriously heavy and slow, and this sort of $500 to $700 wheel set segment is one of the biggest improvements per dollar that you can make. Now, unfortunately, I have to send these wheels back to Ritchey, but if I had the need for more wheels, I don't. Then these would definitely be on my short list for a go-to bomb-proof gravel-oriented wheel set. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you want to get my thoughts on how much wheel is enough for you, then you can check out this video over here. And eventually I'll put up my thoughts on 650B versus 700C for the Diverge. So if that's something you might be interested in, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.